Thank you. And so just finally on that, moving on to guidance for how schools deal with pupils who present with gender distress. You might have seen a YouGov survey earlier this year that showed that nearly 80% of schools now have at least one trans or non-binary identifying pupil. It's up from almost zero 10 years ago. There's been a 5,500% increase in girls presenting at gender clinics, and I don't need to spell out the long-term irreversible consequences of transition for some girls and boys in terms of loss of fertility, loss of sexual function, all sorts of lifelong health problems, and we're seeing the growing rise of detransitioners. The Dr. Hilary Cass's interim report makes clear that socially transitioning a child, so changing their name and pronouns, allowing use of opposite-sex facilities, is not a neutral act. And the former Attorney General in August also made a speech about the legal position of schools and made it clear that schools were on very uncertain legal ground if they do transition a child, particularly without medical supervision. And yet schools are continuing to make this monumental decision for children, even primary schools I'm aware of, that have enabled or encouraged children to transition. And some activist teachers on Twitter have said that they don't intend to follow the Attorney General's legal advice. Now, I know the department is currently writing new guidance based, I think, on the Cass review, but how is Ofsted going to make sure that schools do follow this guidance, given, as you have already alluded to, the highly contested nature, even within schools and within school staff, of some of these issues?
The first thing to say is that there is very limited guidance for schools at the moment. The Department of Education is working towards some guidance which I think it's been expected for some time. I think we're now hoping that it will be published sometime around the end of the year. I haven't myself seen the draft, but it's clearly urgently needed that the issues have got way more complicated over the last few years. I've talked also about the safeguarding issues here. It is really important that parents understand what their child's concerns are. If their child is having serious questions or doubts or explorations of gender identity, to keep parents in the dark about that is obviously a safeguarding risk. So I think it's very important for all schools to understand that whether or not a child is exploring gender identities, the fundamental principles of safeguarding continue to apply, and biological sex continues to be relevant. It's so this guidance to help schools navigate their way through this minefield.
And to pick up on the safeguarding aspect, the children presenting with gender distress, many of them are autistic, many same-sex attracted, many have all sorts of different other issues, and this, like you say, is a safeguarding issue. How should schools respond when a child presents with distress?
Clearly, there is an issue here that usually needs exploring with clinical experts. We know what backlogs there are in CAMS and other services for children. So I suspect one of the reasons that schools are finding this hard is because there are significant numbers of children beginning to think that they need to explore these issues, but a long delay in getting them to appropriate clinical treatment, which may make schools feel that they need to do something in the meantime. I think helping schools manage that matters.
I think we had a supplementary on that from Anna, and then I want to come to Kim.
Thank you, Chief Inspector. A very short